On today's episode of You Asked, will Sony replace the A95L OLED TV next year? Is the Roku Pro Series a competitive TV? Plus, what's the best all-in-one soundbar? Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and this is You Asked, the show where I answer questions you asked in hopes that I can help you and others with similar tech questions. If you've got a question for me, please email it to youasked@digitaltrends.com, and we'll see if your question gets picked to be answered on the show. Before we get started with our first viewer question, I wanted to start by saying thank you to everyone sending in. Is that out of, say, 100 emails that I get coming in, only about 20 of them end up being good candidates for consideration. So what separates the kind of question I can answer versus the kind that I can't? Well, the intro to this show is a big clue. I like to help you and others who have similar tech questions. That means that I'm after questions that lots of folks might have. The more broad they are, the better. Conversely, the more specific or hyper-personal they are, the less likely I'll be able to answer. So, questions around getting good sound without upsetting neighbors. That's an issue a lot of folks struggle with, right? Figuring out whether to use a TV's eARC port or just go straight to a soundbar or receiver with a game console. Lots of folks are probably struggling with the same decision. Questions around whether premium cables are a sham. Those kinds of topics are great. What I can't help with is any kind of question that begs follow-up questions or personal consultations, like, should I buy this TV or this TV? Even with detailed information about your room, where your windows are located, when you tend to watch TV, what kind of content you tend to watch, and what kind of sources you're gonna use, I'd still have more questions. And as you can probably imagine, your situation is gonna be hyper-specific to you. So while the advice I would give you would help you out, it's not likely to help anyone else out because their situation is probably particular in other ways. That makes sense? Anyway, it's my hope that that helps you understand how I approach things when preparing this show each week. Now, let's move on to that first question. Guy Bouchard writes, the new Roku Pro TVs have finally been displayed at my local Best Buy. They looked good, but are they really? Would it compare to the Hisense U8N? So I've got good news for you, Guy. The Roku Pro TV is the next TV I'm gonna review. I'm evaluating it right now, and we'll shoot that review later this week. So that review will go up a few days after you see this You Asked episode. I'm hopeful that the Roku Pro Series will compete with the likes of the Hisense U8N, maybe U7N, but I'm gonna reserve all judgment until I can do a proper evaluation. Sorry to keep you waiting, but hey, you don't have to wait that long to see that review. Adam Taylor writes, hey, I'm looking to get a nice TV and 5.1 system for my new apartment. I'm really wanting to save up for the Sony A95L since it seems to be undefeated as the best for HDR movies, which is my primary use. I've used LG and Samsung before, and while their current OLED offerings are great, I'd like to spend more to get the king. Do you think Sony will release a successor to the A95L next year? And if they do, will it have any worthwhile or meaningful improvements? Or should I just get the A95L later this year and be happy? Thanks, Adam. My bet is that you are not the only person wondering whether Sony will release a successor to the vaunted A95L QD OLED TV. Now, before I answer, I want to be clear that what I'm about to say is educated guesswork. Educated, but also complete guesswork. I do not have any secret info from Sony to draw on when making these guesses. Sometimes I do, and without breaking any rules, I might get coy and send some coded messages, but that's not the case here. I can only use my understanding of the industry to educate my guess. And with that clearly understood, I hope, my guess is that yes, Sony replaces the A95L in 2025. And if they do, I do not expect to hear about it until maybe March of 2025. This is not an announcement Sony is likely to make at CES in January, although that would certainly draw Sony a ton of attention at the big trade show. So Sony, Maybe? Anyway, the reason I think Sony is likely to replace the A95L is twofold. One, the only reason Sony would not replace the A95L is if the Bravia 9 mini LED TV that I just reviewed was so good that having a QD OLED TV was irrelevant. And while the Bravia 9 is a great mini LED TV, it does not make OLED irrelevant. The need for something like the A95L is still there. And then two, it is virtually unheard of to have a product cycle that lasts more than 2 years. Still beats the competition's newest TVs. But remember, August 21st, 2023. Deliveries didn't happen for some weeks after that. So the first generation QD OLED panel. So the new Sony would have at least the second gen panel, like the